The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Does 180 degrees from understanding American allies to backing America's adversaries that you resign.
You're saying Marco Rubio should resign?
And Mike Waltz, this is really the time to do it. If they don't get out now, I think their reputations will suffer for a long, long time.
I mean, there's so many things that struck me, Ben, just the optics of this red-faced old man whose brains are absolutely cooked, berating and basically saying, beg like a dog, beg, be grateful, get on your knees.
I think the U.S. is no longer a part of the free world, Chris. And what we saw is not like a shift in U.S. policy. What we saw was not a disagreement in the Oval Office. What we saw was not political theatrics. What we saw is that the United States has switched sides in this war. The United States is on the side of Russia.
The American-European alliance is effectively over. The North Star of the post-war order, where the United States' strongest alliances are with fellow democracies over authoritarian regimes, has ended. 80 years of diplomacy, born of ashes and 35 million dead, undone by one and a half men today.
I want to know why our ally is allowed to disrespect the United States of America, the leader, the current leader of this.
J.D. Vance owes Zelenskyy an apology. President Trump owes Zelenskyy an apology for the way he was treated.
For what?
I demand it. What? I demand that they give.
You demand. Okay.
No, I respect President and I respect American people. And if I don't know if I think that we have to be very open and very honest. And I'm not sure that we did something bad.
Met with Zelenskyy this morning. I urged him to stay on message, be grateful, be thankful. We'll talk about details of security guarantees later. Keep it upbeat, keep it positive. It was absolute, utter disaster. The question for me is he redeemable in the eyes of Americans?
Confident Zelenskyy will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. Back in 2022, it was the clear majority, 72% through the floor. Through the floor by 2024, just 48% of Americans say that they're confident that Zelenskyy will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs.
I've never seen anything like President Zelensky's behavior there. He berated and interrupted his host, and instead of expressing gratitude for the extraordinary help that the U.S. has provided his country.
I mean, all Zelenskyy had to do today was put on a tie, show up, smile, say thank you, sign the papers, and have lunch. That's it. And he couldn't do that. And this followed 10 days of being difficult in private and now one day of being stupid in public. This did not have to go down this way.
Okay.
And however you feel about why it started, why it's going on, who's right and who's wrong, we can help them in this and come out okay on the other side, and he's making it hard.
Well, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I actually agree with Scott. And everything that he said was basically right.
Lots and lots of angles to this story, to be sure, and we'll try to bounce around to many of them on today's show. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. You can get to the live video stream of this program at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel, rumble.com/Trumpet Daily. While I was away, we were down at the college campout. I gave a message Friday evening. I was just going to do a Bible study. And I told the students, it's nice. I haven't even really been into the news, at least up until the explosion in the Oval Office on Friday. And I told them I wasn't going to cover much news ahead of the Bible study. But as it turns out, I went on for 15, 20 minutes because of all that was happening. Friday afternoon, Zelenskyy was in town to sign the agreement. And for some reason, he insisted on having an event at the White House as well. And of course, by now, you know what happened. And I don't really even have that many clips from the fiery exchange. It just happened in that last 10-minute period of what was otherwise a cordial conversation. 40 minutes. Donald Trump praising him, the people of Ukraine, for their fighting spirit. And then talking about how much of a commitment America was making with this rare earth minerals deal. You're basically going to get an American presence through contractors and workers and such in eastern Ukraine. And Ukraine would be rebuilt from all of the revenues. And of course, the United States would be repaid the many hundreds of billions of dollars that we've been putting into Ukraine in the last several years. But everything blew up. And as I say, there's lots and lots of different angles to take. But just stepping back and looking at the big picture, think of Isaiah 59 and verse 8. The way of peace they know not. We just don't know the way to peace. It's amazing to hear people, and again, what a stark difference between the communist left that wanted to blow up this deal. Obama's people, they were on the horn with Zelenskyy ahead of the meeting. Where they stand, they wanted the deal to blow up, and then you've got the MAGA supporters that are there saying, fine, if he's going to disrespect the U.S. president like this, then send him packing and say there's no more aid. Say you're on your own. They're cheering. MAGA is cheering. They're saying, finally someone stood up to him. We've been worshiping him as the second coming of Winston Churchill. You know, I like this tweet by Jeremy Boring talking about, again, how complicated the world is. And I mean, this tells you that we're living in Satan's world. All the complexities here. He says Putin is the aggressor in the current war, and countries wanting to align with NATO in no way justifies his invasion of Ukraine. It says Ukraine is a corrupt state. I mean, that's true as well. Two bad things can be true at the same time, which in no way justifies its destruction by Russia. I mean, just because Ukraine and its government is corrupt doesn't mean Russia can just waltz right in and take what it wants. But that's what it's been doing. I mean, for those that are fixated on Trump being aligned with Putin, think about the decades-long appeasement spearheaded by the United States for I think it was the Clinton era, where Ukraine gave up its nukes. And in large part to appease Russia. That's the way Russia wanted it. And then Russia's on the march, 2008 into Georgia. And then comes Obama, and we've got the reset button. And then we've got Obama himself saying, tell Vladimir I'll have more flexibility when I win re-election. And then he wins that, and Putin helps himself to Crimea, and Obama sends blankets. That's right. And what was it the fake president said at the start of this phase of the war? This ongoing phase of Russia trying to rebuild its empire through Ukraine? Or at least by taking Ukraine back, or at least large swaths of it. The fake president said, yeah, well, we won't do much if it's a minor incursion. What? He invited this. And so now here, and by the way, the first term of Trump, Putin was relatively quiet. And now here we are, hundreds of billions of dollars later from the U.S. perspective. And there's Jesse Waters was right on his Friday episode. The security that Zelenskyy, and you can't fault Zelenskyy for wanting security. No one wants to sign away its own territory with any kind of ceasefire agreement. But as Jesse said, the security assurance is a U.S. presence in eastern Ukraine. Because then Putin's going to think twice about firing upon the American contractors. I mean, the security agreement, just looking at the bigger picture, really is NATO. That's why Ukraine's wanted into NATO. Why won't NATO let them in? If they want absolute security. Anyhow, this tweet, it says, Zelensky's corrupt, but he acted heroically in the months following the invasion of his country by a superior force. America does have an interest in deterring Russian aggression in Europe. This war would not have started if Trump had been president. He's just pointing out all of the complications here. It says this war would not have started if America, NATO, or a European coalition had moved tripwire troops into Ukraine or initiated a no-fly zone over the country in 2021. Instead, Joe Biden said it was okay he's okay with a small invasion. Joe Obama said this. Ukraine cannot win the war without America. Zelenskyy missed his best opportunity for peace over 2 years ago. Zelenskyy is missing his second best opportunity for peace right now. Zelenskyy is a fool for campaigning in the U.S. presidential election and for being disrespectful to his largest patron. He's foolish for doing this. It makes you wonder, by the way, if he didn't have some security assurances behind closed doors in Europe. Now, Europe, you would look at it today and think it doesn't have certainly not the means to send as much help and assistance as the U.S. has been sending. But that he would come and act this way, his largest patron, as it says there, a lot of it doesn't make much sense. Unless maybe there's some high powers that are assuring him that, look, the big goal here is to get the United States out of Europe. You know, another interesting angle to this, just looking at it from God's perspective, is that God's using Jeroboam to save America, to save Israel. That's his primary mission. That's his God-backed mission. And then along with that, we're seeing all these other prophecies being fulfilled, or at least accelerating toward their fulfillment. You saw the difference between the radical left and the MAGA supporters in that cold open. Another stark difference is the way that the MAGA support for Donald Trump, their sentiments, when you compare them with Europe. With Europe, they're coming together. The iron and the clay are coalescing. You've got everyone in Europe talking about even putting boots on the ground to help defend Ukraine. I mean, this is the seventh and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. This is what Germany has envisioned for decades. Germany is rebuilding its empire as well. And we know that ultimately, I mean, you can really look at the way Europe reacts to all this. Just the hatred, the contempt that they find it hard to conceal. The contempt for Orange Hitler. You can see how that our lovers are going to betray us. Watch Putin as he rebuilds his empire and also looks east to form the biblically prophesied alliance with China and the Asian hordes. And then watch Germany as it rebuilds its empire. And then in the short term, we're witnessing fulfilled prophecy in the form of Jeroboam saving Israel, saving America, putting those tens of billions toward the southern border of the United States. It says you can disagree. America's interests intersect with Ukraine's, but are distinct. The war must end. It says you can disagree with any of these points, but for the most part, people are just barking partisan talking points and pretending there's no complexity in a war that has probably killed 1.5 million people and implicates the entire West and the two largest nuclear powers on Earth. There's plenty to disagree with, but look back at Isaiah 59 and verse 8. We're seeing that fulfilled. We don't know the way to peace in Ukraine or anywhere. Everything that man touches, look at what it turns to. You know, read Psalm 19. You see those perfect laws of God, and of course before that, it says the heavens declare God's glory. You see God's handiwork. And then you look at what human beings have done to this earth over the past 6,000 years. There's more explosions coming. you can see human nature on display. You know, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance feeling disrespected, and Zelenskyy feeling like I'm going to lose part of my country if I agree to a ceasefire of some kind. This, as I say, I don't have many clips from the argument in the Oval Office on Friday, but I thought this one highlighted the point on disrespecting. I mean, this is the Oval Office, you know, and there was a reporter that called out Zelenskyy for not wearing a coat and tie. You know, he's known for wearing his sweatshirts or his fatigues or whatever they are. And he comes to the White House. He's greeted by President Trump as he gets out of the motorcade. I don't know if Trump knew that he'd been with all these Democrat senators and talking with Obama people on the phone ahead of the meeting, but that was going on. I'll read you the tweet in just a second from Senator Murphy. He gets out, as I say, it's 40 minutes of pleasantries for the most part. And Donald Trump saying this represents a significant commitment from the United States. Do you think Vladimir Putin wants to see, of course he's celebrating over what happened Friday, but as far as the deal, I mean, you had reports that the days before Friday's meeting that the deal was done. The deal was done. All he had to do, as you heard in the cold open, was to come and sign the deal. You know, be respectful, eat lunch, have the dual press conference, and sign the mineral rights deal that would benefit both Ukraine and the United States. Instead, though, this is what happened. Clip one.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
Playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
You're
playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
And then he goes on Brett Baer a few hours later and says, I don't have anything to apologize for. There he is talking over. He did it with J.D. Vance as well. Called J.D. by his first name, by the way. And J.D. responded by saying, Mr. President, with all due respect, you're being disrespectful. You're being ungrateful. Whether it's the attire, talking over in the Oval Office. I mean, it's one thing to do it behind closed doors or over lunch as you try to hammer out the security of this. But as J.D. Vance pointed out, Vice President Vance pointed out, you're litigating this in front of the TV cameras. And of course, Donald Trump, for his part, said later, well, I guess this makes for great television. How many, as one of our news gatherers said this morning, again, how many big stories are being ignored right now because of this fight? I'll get to some of the things we've said in our literature over the years with respect to the decades-long appeasement of Vladimir Putin and just tyrants in general. There's no strength in America, at least not abroad. Now, again, God brought Jeroboam back for a specific purpose. And here at home, he's showing some strength. This is from the New York Post. Top Zelenskyy advisor pushed for Oval Office mineral deal signing against Trump envoy Kellogg's advice. You know, for those that would say this was somehow staged and that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance wanted to ambush Zelenskyy, there's really more evidence to suggest that it was staged by the Ukrainian officials. Again, maybe they got some security guarantees behind closed doors from other nations, Germany perhaps. You see how Europe is reacting over the weekend. I mean, he's over there and it's hugs and kisses. He was tweeting out constantly Friday afternoon, thanking all of these European states for their support. And of course, all these European states now see the United States as the big problem, the obstacle to peace. How convenient. President Trump's special envoy to the Ukraine war urged Volodymyr Zelenskyy to sign the now deferred mineral rights deal with Washington during the envoy's visit to Kyiv last week. But Zelensky's chief of staff insisted on the Friday Oval Office signing that went badly awry. So he agreed to sign this, I think, 3 times. If we're going to talk about people backing out of deals, which Zelenskyy made a big point of, and he was right. You can't trust Putin. He doesn't keep his word. That's a bigger problem than just with one dictator. You see that all over the earth. And you see in U.S. administrations, a willingness to, in history, to sit down with anybody, at the very least, to maybe put off some decisions that are going to be difficult, or some that renege on their deals. Now it really gets under the skin of the communist left for Donald Trump to even have a phone call with Vladimir Putin. And again, it's because you heard it in the cold open. They see Donald Trump as the Orange Hitler. He's the biggest menace on earth. And so here were Obama's people working behind the scenes to try to blow up this deal. Why? Why would they? If they're so concerned about Ukraine, and here comes Donald Trump to actually commit to a U.S. presence in Ukraine. That's about the best security guarantee that you're going to get. And it blows up. It says here, after 3 days of intense negotiations, retired General Keith Kellogg secured the long-sought agreement with Ukraine that would have provided Washington with 50% of all future proceeds from the European country's lucrative, critical, and rare earth minerals. Here they get the U.S. powerhouse and technology to unearth them, and then the U.S. and Ukraine split the proceeds. They're partners, in other words. It says here, as negotiations wrapped up, Zelenskyy chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, pushed for the Ukrainian president to join Trump at the White House to sign the agreement. And Kellogg, for his, and again, 3 days of intense negotiation, for all of those people to say that the U.S. shut Ukraine out, that Ukraine wasn't part of the discussion. It's nonsense. They were discussing this deal for days. And as I've played before, it was Trump who said Zelenskyy the first time around backed out. And Trump didn't like it. And yet you saw in the cold open, too, the reference to the campaigning that Zelenskyy did with Shapiro in Pennsylvania. This is a month before the elections, and Trump's people complained of election interference. He's coming over here with Democrats in Pennsylvania, a swing state, and then he's signing these missiles that are U.S. made, that are going to Ukraine to blow up Russians. And there he is, all smiles, signing the weapons personally. Nobody, another angle to this, nobody expected Donald Trump to ever come back. Nobody expected him to return to the White House. He does, and then this is what he's inheriting. This is what leave aside God's perspective for a moment and look at what he's inheriting. And then ask yourself, okay, what's the Democrats' plan? What's the end game here? It obviously hasn't been to win the war. Biden and his people just sent enough for basically the warfare to continue, and it has for 3 years. So those that want the war to continue, what's their goal? I guess to stop Putin. Okay. Well, you stop him by defeating him. Who's willing to do that? America hasn't been willing to do that. Europe, to this point, has been quite happy to see the conflict continue and America go broke. Here comes Jeroboam. And he says, my mission, I campaigned on this, it's to save America. Now, he's going to be in for some surprises. Again, when the lovers turn on us, and he sees just how far he gets or doesn't get by sitting down with tyrants. We've seen a glimpse of it already in the Middle East. And of course, it's happened. It's happened with Putin's Russia. Hillary Clinton going over there saying, let's have a good relationship. Barack Obama leaning over saying, just tell Vladimir I'll have a little more flexibility if I win my reelection. And then let him know if I'm back in there, he can have Crimea. And I'll send blankets to the Ukrainians because, I care so much. A history of appeasement. And now here comes Donald Trump. It's so easy, isn't it, as I said last week, to gang up on Orange Hitler. And you can see how he's such a polarizing figure that people are, they're digging in their heels. And the German war machine is back in motion. Germany's rebuilding its empire, and it now has the world's support and even the Trump administration's support to rebuild its military. I went through that with you last week. Just amazing when you think about all of the prophetic implications of what we're witnessing. Another New York Post piece. Disaster in the Oval Office. Democrats lead Zelenskyy. Ukraine off a cliff with pressure to reject the mineral deal. He had agreed to it. He agreed to it 3 times. Why would Democrats, Americans, pressure Zelenskyy to blow it up? It says here, before meeting Trump, Zelenskyy met with anti-Trump Democrats who advised him to reject the terms of the mineral deal the president was offering, according to Senator Chris Murphy. You got to reject the deal. There's not enough security guarantees in it. You've got to reject this deal. See, they're going after Trump. They don't want a stronger America. They don't care about Ukraine. They'll hop on either side. Right up until Orange Hitler came along, Democrats, including Clinton, including Obama, they were reaching out to Putin. They were appeasing Putin. This is just what we've done. And then Trump comes along, and all of a sudden, it's Trump-Russia collusion. Now Putin, he's the worst. And Trump, he's even worse than Putin. As one commentator said, this gives them yet another opportunity to resurrect the Trump-Putin collusion hoax. Trump must love Putin. It says here, he attached a picture of Zelenskyy at a conference table with Murphy seated on the opposite side. Murphy, he tweeted this out about an hour before the blow-up in the Oval Office Friday. So the timeline's there. This is his tweet. Just finished a meeting with President Zelenskyy here in D.C. He confirmed that the Ukrainian people will not support a fake peace agreement where Putin gets everything he wants and there are no security arrangements for Ukraine. That's a senator, a U.S. senator, an American, a Democrat, obviously. It says the meeting, as the world now knows, quickly went off the rails. This is talking about the Oval Office, and ended with Trump angrily ejecting the arrogant ingrate from the White House. The earlier meeting with Dems undercuts wild claims that Trump and Vice President Vance staged an ambush. In fact, it was Zelenskyy who came with an ulterior motive. Uh-oh. So could Zelenskyy be a bad guy, or is the only bad guy Putin? It says here the purpose of the meeting was to sign the mineral agreement he and Trump representatives had negotiated. He had twice refused to sign it after promising to, and thanks to Murphy, we now know he had no intention of signing it Friday. So there you go. Trump's fault, right? Trump is hardly a perfect man, but this was an agreement. And U.S. officials, Kellogg wanted him to sign it and not even come to D.C. because he knew that this relationship has had a little trouble, Trump and Zelensky. So look, just sign the deal and you get American support. You get continuous funding, but you also agree to the mineral rights split. And he backed out. Zelensky, who privately agreed to the terms, has every right to demand a security agreement up to a point, but he didn't get one. And his decision to respond by insulting the president and vice president, interrupting them and waving off their responses was madness. It was madness. And then it quotes all these Democrats that are there, just like the European leaders, just like European elites. They're cheering Zelensky. He finally stood up to Orange Hitler. You can see, as I say, a pretty clear divide. Why would you just put yourself in Zelensky's shoes? I mean, if America's underwriting this operation and has been for 3 years, they're signing the checks, so to speak. Why would you come and behave the way that he did Friday afternoon? Well, as I say, maybe there were some security discussions with other nations that are quite happy to see the U.S. presence, the U.S. dominance over Europe coming to an end. That's really the big significance here, the big takeaway. This prophesied divide between the United States and Europe. The breakup of the NATO alliance. Just like God said that Europe, or rather Britain, wouldn't be a part of this prophesied union of nations in Europe, it's obvious that America also is going to be on the outside looking in. And right now, through NATO, America has a strong presence in the European Union, but we're seeing that come to an end quickly. This other commentator, Richard Hanania, he said, I watched the entire press conference with Zelensky. There were 40 minutes of discussion up to the the argument. There was no agreement because of the argument. It says most people saw at most the last 10 minutes. The whole video gives the proper context. When I first watched the argument without the proper context, I thought it was possible that Trump and Vance ambushed Zelensky or were even trying to humiliate him. That's not what happened. This is, by the way, this guy, Hanania, he's a Zelensky fan. He's cheering on Zelensky, or has been. It says here, you had 40 minutes of calm conversation. Vance made a point that didn't attack Zelensky and wasn't even addressed to him. And Zelensky clearly started the argument. Everybody in the world knows that Trump and Vance want diplomacy. They want to see if they can stop the shooting. They do want to reach out to Putin. And again, we've talked about how delusional it is to try to sit down and negotiate with madmen. There's a lot of madmen in this world. That's why we don't know the way to peace. We won't view anything God's way. Certainly not the peace negotiations. And so here are all these men, these diplomats, in fine suits, traveling the world like Kellogg as he was over there in Ukraine for 3 days, hashing out this agreement. We've got to make this deal. And you have Trump for his part, talking this entire conference about, look, I'm a deal maker. I want to make a deal. I want the killing to stop. It's not like that was a surprise to anybody. It says here, for his part, Trump made clear that the U.S. would continue delivering military aid. All Zelensky had to do was remain calm for a few more minutes, and they would have signed the deal. Leaving aside who set up who, if that even happened, think about the devil, the God of this world. He's the one setting this up. He's the one that wants to see the German military machine return and take matters into its own hands. The argument started when Trump pointed out that it would be hard to make a deal if you talk about Putin the way Zelensky does. Trump tried to, again, navigate this carefully. Look, both of these guys hate each other. I'm trying to be the middleman here. The whole world expects him to be the middleman and to support Zelenskyy, of course. But what other nation has provided as much support for Zelenskyy in Ukraine than the United States? A history of appeasement, as I say. And then there was the radical left turning on a dime as soon as Orange Hitler showed up. Now it's all things Putin. Now it's all things Russia. But the fact remains, I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars of military aid was just pouring into Ukraine. So, it's interesting, too, to just think about Russia and its strength. I mean, it's headed up by the Prince of Rosh. But I think 3 years of trying to capture Ukraine, or at least parts of it, has exposed some weaknesses in the Russian bear as well. They certainly don't have the economy that certain countries in Europe have. Here again, we played that clip for you earlier, the clip of putting all the European nations together. If they can just Putin loves it when the U.S. is spending all of its resources and then trying to keep this European Union loosely affiliated and really weak. I think as Putin views Europe now, again, just trying to think about what he sees as Europe comes together, speaks with one voice, has one military, has a united economy. You think Vladimir Putin sees that as a good development, particularly when it's headed up by Germany? Particularly when Germany is the powerhouse of that union, whether you look at it economically or militarily. It says here the Zelenskyy-Trump dynamic was calm and stable. It was when Vance spoke that Zelenskyy started to interrogate him. Throughout the press conference to that point, everyone was making their arguments directly to the audience. Zelenskyy decided to challenge Vance and ask him hostile questions. What kind of diplomacy do you mean, JD? That's what the man in the sweatshirt said in the Oval Office. He went back to his point that Putin never sticks to ceasefires, once again implying that negotiations are pointless. Why on earth would you do this? Then came the fight that we all saw. This guy says at the end, I've been a fan of Zelenskyy up to this point, but this showed so much incompetence, if not emotional instability, and I don't see how he recovers from this. I mean, if you lose Lindsey Graham, Lindsey Graham came out the same day and said, that's it. He needs to resign. We can't work with him. But it doesn't look like he's going to go away. He suspends the elections. He's on, year six of his term, his 5-year term. And so it continues. He scurries over to Europe, and he's getting support, even from Britain, which is shocking. The British PM talking about boots on the ground in Ukraine. Wow. It says here, Ukraine should probably go with new leadership at this point to just emphasize, well, maybe I can play for you some of the, what do we have left? 15 minutes. Some of the backstory to what led up to this deal. I think Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, was out on TV through the weekend to just explain at least the U.S. position. Start with clip 8.
The president's been very clear. He campaigned on this. He thinks this war should have never started. He believes, and I agree, that had he been president, it never would have happened. Now here we are. He's trying to bring an end to this conflict. We've explained very clearly what our plan is here, which is we want to get the Russians to a negotiating table. We want to explore whether peace is possible. They understand this. They also understand that this agreement that was supposed to be signed today was supposed to be an agreement that binds America economically to Ukraine, which to me, as I've explained, and I think the president alluded to today, is a security guarantee in its own way, because we're involved. It's now us. It's our interests. That was all explained. That was all understood. And nonetheless, for the last 10 days, in every engagement we've had with the Ukrainians, there's been complications in getting that point across, including the public statements that President Zelenskyy has made. But they insisted on coming to D.C. This agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington. And there was and should have been a very clear understanding. Don't come here and create a such scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. President Zelenskyy took it in that direction, and it ended in a predictable outcome as a result.
Yeah, he crossed the line, and Donald Trump didn't like it. Neither did J.D. Vance, and the whole world saw this spectacle. It was Zelensky's people that insisted on coming to the Oval Office. The agreement had been finalized the night before. He was coming to sign it. He had agreed to do so. And then everything blew up. Now, from God's perspective, does God, I mean, he's the one that prophesies of the seventh and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. Eventually, there's going to be no U.S. presence in Europe. You think God wants a strong U.S. presence in eastern Ukraine? Everything just blew up like that. I've been emphasizing recently just how sudden and abrupt so many of these earth-shaking developments are happening. Now, Putin's going to have to square off with Europe, ultimately. As to what happens with Ukraine in the short term, I mean, I guess it's anyone's guess. But they insisted on coming to the White House, and as it turns out, it lasted for a couple of hours. Donald Trump, how many people, just to help you appreciate the historic nature of what we witnessed Friday afternoon, how many leaders of countries come into the Oval Office and talk to a U.S. president that way and interrupt him that way and dress that way? And then furthermore, how many times has a U.S. president just abruptly, he's barred from the White House, or he sent him packing? No luncheon. No dual press conference. He kicked him out. He kicked out Volodymyr Zelenskyy. It's unbelievable what we're seeing, what we're witnessing. Play a bit more from Secretary Rubio, clip 9.
But again, when you have comments that deliberately appear to be I mean, after having discussed this repeatedly, deliberately appear to be geared towards making the argument that peace is not possible. You know, again, he turns to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? Almost as if to say, these people, you can't deal with them. You can't have any negotiations with Putin because he can't be trusted, and you're just wasting your time on negotiations. Well, he's directly, basically undermining everything the president has told them he's trying to do. Look, there's no need for that. You start to suspect, does he really want an end to this war? Does he just think that, we have to do whatever he says and give him anything he wants without any end game? That was the Biden strategy. We were funding a stalemate. We were funding a meat grinder. And unfortunately, for the Ukrainians, the Russians have more meat to grind, and they don't care about human life. We've seen it, human waves, the North Koreans, etc. And so this is a very complex thing. It's very delicate. It's very costly. It's very bloody. It needs to be brought to an end, but it isn't going to be brought to an end with public pronouncements and maximalist demands in the public, but in real diplomacy. The vice president was right.
And again, diplomacy is not going to solve this complex situation either, but it was no secret. It was definitely no secret that this is the course that a Trump-led America was on. Here's another from Secretary Rubio, clip 10.
The point now is it has to end. And the way it ends is you get people to a negotiating table. And the president, who's the ultimate deal maker, knows you don't get people to a negotiating table when you're calling them names and you're accusing them of things, because at the end of the day, this is not a political campaign. Okay? This is high stakes international diplomacy and an effort to bring about an end to a very, very dangerous war. Ultimately, that is the job of the State Department. The State Department doesn't fight wars. It ends them. It tries to end them. And that's usually, by the way, celebrated. I mean, throughout history, I've watched presidents to bring about an end to wars and conflicts, and people celebrate that. They applaud it. I think we should be very proud and happy that we have a president whose prime objective is not to get into wars, but to prevent wars and to get out of wars. That is a very noble, laudable goal. Everyone should be applauding it, and he should be given the space to do that, not undermined by demands that he call Putin names games or that we say things that impede the ability to conduct real diplomacy, as the vice president said today.
So again, no surprises, right? Zelenskyy knew what he was coming into, and he took his opportunity to lecture the United States in front of the TV cameras as they were rolling. It does make you, as I say, it makes you think about what security guarantees he may already have elsewhere, because you get as far as you can. In a lot of ways, he typifies, as I've said previously, the way the world thinks with respect to the ATM machine that is the United States. Just the constant payments. He's like the individual, just to put it in an individual sense, who's addicted to welfare and expects it. I mean, if you're given preferential treatment over time, I think it was Thomas Sowell who said this, if you're given preferential treatment and then all of a sudden it's drawn back to where you're treated like everybody else, you'll see it as discriminatory. Because you're so used to the hand. Just keep sending the money. I'm fighting Putin. Just keep sending the checks. Send blank checks so that we have a never-ending supply of U.S. support. And then also guarantee our security. I mean, these are some huge demands. And finally, America says, that's enough. We can't afford it. We're going broke. And you add to this, I mean, all the waste that Doge has discovered. Mike Johnson this morning saying that, yep, the CR we're going to pass to get us through whatever, August or September. We're not going to incorporate any of the cuts that should be there because of what Doge has found. So we'll just keep spending. The world doesn't know the way to peace. It also doesn't know the way to balance a budget. It's not God's world. You know, the context, as I gave to you earlier, the decades-long policy of appeasing Vladimir Putin, Secretary Rubio gave some context in that same interview. This is clip 11.
President Obama refused to provide them defensive capabilities in terms of military hardware. He did provide them blankets.
Yeah, and
he
that
did
was
provide
brought up
humanitarian
today during
aid.
that meeting.
It was brought up, but I was there. In fact, I vividly recall at the time Vice President Biden saying to me in a meeting that we had at the Vice President's residence that the reason why we didn't want to provide them those weapons is because they might use them. That was his exact quote. And that was the attitude. I remember clearly then the Ukrainian leaders saying, we don't need more blankets or MREs. We need weapons to defend ourselves. And they didn't do it. President Trump did. He provided them weaponry, some of it, much of it, which was used at the beginning of this war. And without those weapons being in their stocks, this war could have been over very quickly, 2, 3, 4 days. Another pot shot that Zelenskyy took today, when the president pointed that out, you know what Zelenskyy said? He said, yeah, we've heard that from the Russians. That's not a Russian narrative. That was the official position, okay, of the United States. I vividly recall being briefed by leaders in the Biden administration telling us that this war was going to be over in 5 to 6 days. They believed that. That was their assessment at the time. And it wasn't the case because of the weapons that Ukraine had in its stocks because of President Trump in his first term. So he should have been grateful for that and grateful for what we're doing now. And one more point. It's not just President Trump. There's news reports out there from NBC News, at least is one of the places I recall, reporting that Biden had a shouting match with Zelenskyy for not being grateful and not being thankful for everything that was provided back in 2022. Now, that didn't happen in front of the press. That was leaked, but it got out there. These frustrations are not unique to President Trump.
Trump! It's so easy, isn't it, to just assign all of the blame to Trump. Some important context there. What did Obama give when Putin waltzed in, took Crimea? He sent blankets. That's it. That's it. You step back, though. You look at the bigger picture. I mean, in a lot of ways, what happened on Friday was the moment that the break, the America's break from Europe, or vice versa, finally and completely was set in stone. I mean, this is it. It's over. It's over. You look at the reaction. This was the by refusing to bend to Washington. I think this is a representative. The French prime minister, by refusing to bend in Washington, Zelenskyy was the honor of Europe. The MAGA movement in the United States, we're done with him. But in Europe, he's the honor of the continent. And then he goes over to the UK. They've got this emergency summit. All these European leaders showing their support. Even the tweets, as I said, Friday afternoon, he tweeted out to leaders of Ukraine, Poland, Spain, Moldova, Lithuania, the Czech Republic, Latvia, Norway, Germany, Sweden, Portugal, the EU Parliament, France, Netherlands, Ireland, Estonia, Finland, all of them. He tweeted back at them saying, thank you for your support. So he's getting all the support, quote unquote, from Europe. And I guess there's no support from America. It's all, the whole problem is America. You can see why the president and the vice president were just, this is incredibly ungrateful. You haven't said thank you once in this meeting. That's what the vice president said to him. And then the headlines from over the weekend. The Telegraph, Starmer, European leaders must step up at once in a generation moment. We've got to step up. We've got to unite. This is from Bloomberg. Europe's nightmare is here. They have to fight Putin without the U.S. Yeah, the U.S. won't fight against Putin. Well, in large part, that's true. That's been historically true. Now they've got a perfect excuse. The pretext for a European military machine. The German war machine is revived. CNN, Europeans embrace Zelenskyy after he was vilified by Trump. Europeans, they just love Zelenskyy, and Trump hates him. You know, he loves Putin, but he vilifies Zelenskyy. This is Michael Schellenberger. I just thought this was insightful because, you know, I know he's been red-pilled to some degree. He's had a lot more conservative things to say, particularly about the U.S. intel community. But he's just talking here about just the ideological divide between America and Europe. And again, you know, the Bible talks about the lovers betraying us, but more and more, I mean, you can look at the statements and see they're not even pretending to be lovers. They're viewing the United States, certainly a Trump-led America, as the enemy. And Americans, for their part, they've had enough of Europe as well. This is significant with respect to prophecy. Play this from Michael Schellenberger, clip 12.
People on the left, on the right, they do not want to be in a nuclear war with Russia. How can we explain this to you? We do not want to continue to be in the Ukraine war. We want peace. Our natural inclination is to actually not get involved in conflicts in Europe and Asia. We didn't want to have to continue to intervene after World War II. I get it, but times have changed. We're ready to move on. I know we bear a lot of responsibility for this. The United States bears a lot of responsibility for this. Our people, our administrations, our think tanks told Zelenskyy that, and told the Europeans that, you know, we were loyal to that alliance, that we were going to stick with them. No, that's not, the American people are not on board with that. This is not, again, the left has traditionally been against those kinds of military entanglements. Now the right is, but a lot of the left is too. A lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals. I would love an orderly transition here, but the behavior that we're seeing coming out of European leaders and out of Zelenskyy just now in the Oval Office suggests that the relationship is over.
Wow. And then he goes on to talk about how that Europeans have been able to focus on, you know, lots and lots of welfare programs because they haven't had to put any money toward defense. This is, again, something that Donald Trump has called them out for, not just in this term, but in the first term as well. Play that last one. We'll go just a little bit over today. Play the last clip, clip 13.
I don't think Europeans really understand how much Americans want to deal with our problems. We go to Europe. You have universal health care. You work 35 hours a week. You retire at a young age. You don't work nearly as hard as we do in the United States. You have many more benefits, in large part because we pay for all of your security, or a large part of it. And in return, we just get disrespect, entitlement, like we're like your children, and this is a dysfunctional relationship. It needs to end. It needs to change. Okay, maybe there's a transition period, something, but this is gone too far. And I think that the anger that you saw in the White House with Trump and Vance, with Zelensky holding his arms, rolling his eyes, acting like he was telling us what the deal was, no. That's not a Republican, Democrat, whatever thing. That is not how we're going to be treated by people that we're helping.
And the thing of it is, you could find plenty of European elites that would give the same speech from Europe's perspective, saying this is a dysfunctional relationship that needs to end. And the thing of it is, it's ending. It is ending. And that clears the way for the emergence of the Holy Roman Empire. America's returning to its isolationist ways. We don't want to be a part of it. We don't want a part of Ukraine. We don't want a part of Europe. You guys fend for yourselves. And well, they will. They certainly will. I don't have time to get into all of the excerpts I have from our literature in years past, but I can at least refer you to this one. The Holy Roman Empire in prophecy. There's one final prophesied rise of that Holy Roman Empire coming out of the heart of Europe. And as Herbert Armstrong so often said, Europe's beating heart is in Germany. That's all we have time for on today's show. I took you over just a little bit, but I won't charge you for those extra minutes. Free programming, the fastest moving programming in broadcasting. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show, and we'll see you tomorrow.